And the thing is, I do believe there was talk about these things. I believe if we study history, the Confederates were able to shoot pterodactyls, back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online.
Google it
They
yourself.
spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge winglet. It was a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so,
what I'm saying is Jesus wrote a dinosaur to work. That's history. It's in the Bible. How to Train Your Dragon.
Historical facts.
And if you don't believe it, do your own research. Pull up Google. You'll find the picture, I promise.
Oh my god.
Thank you, John Gleason, Godless engineer, for gifting me this beautiful moment. Y'all remember when they tried to cancel Steven Spielberg for posing with an animatronic triceratops animal rights activist?
Back it up.
Hit it from the back.
Cloaca. Historical facts.
Eat my ass, BP. You're down here bailing on the rest of us because you don't want to process your grief and shame like a normal person by drinking and mistreating strangers.
No, Rick. It is you who must nibble my cloaca, or bird asshole.
Everyone knows what a cloaca is.
back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online. They spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge winglet. It's a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so,
Paul Bunyan was sharing some Funyuns with his pet velociraptor.
Whoa.
Oh, you thought it was an ox? Roll back the clock. Let me knock the socks off. Historical facts.
I didn't cut out. You heard me. Are you a pervert or something? Okay.
What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Tonight, we have Kirk Cameron sitting down with Sean McDowell to go over the evidence for a historical Jesus. Now, I don't want this to be misconstrued with an argument against the resurrection. Typically, I separate mythicism from anti-resurrection type arguments because, even on the minimal mythicist idea, we're not saying like a resurrection didn't happen. It's just that they perceived it to have happened in a different place. And so on the mythicist idea, that's kind of where that's at. But as far as like the resurrection happening historically, perfectly fine starting from a position of of the idea that Jesus existed. But for tonight's video, we are going over the historical evidence for Jesus. But considering it's Easter weekend, I wanted to kind of preface that. But anyways, we're going to find out what Sean McDowell's top 3 pieces of evidence are for a historical Jesus. And he will be sure to disappoint with this because, he's talking to a very evangelical crowd, so they're just going to eat all of it up without questioning a thing. And so that's kind of how it sounds like it's prepared. So if you heathens want to fuck around and find out how bad the evidence is that Sean McDowell uses for a historical Jesus, then please stay tuned.
What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? A lot of things are great when they're thick. But you know what shouldn't be thick? Your wallet. Look at this thing. Stop treating your wallet like it's an industrial-sized Swiss Army knife and get yourself a Ridge wallet. Just look at that size reduction. Instead of having a big old thing, now you got a little one. I have to say, I love the low profile of these wallets because then when you sit down, it doesn't feel like you're getting sodomized by a boulder. Also, your cash and cards are easily accessible, so you don't have to stand there and awkwardly sift through the collection of receipts that you keep for no reason. This would be a perfect Father's Day gift, and if you use the code Godless Engineer, then you'll get 15% off your order. They come in over 30 colors and styles, including this forged ember and burnt titanium. Get yourself a Ridge wallet today by going to ridge.com/Godless Engineer. All right, now go on and enjoy your show.
All right, so tonight's show is sponsored by Ridge again. If you want to, go to ridge.com/Godless Engineer, and you too can get 15% off of a Ridge wallet if you want to get that. But before we begin tonight, I want to let everybody know that the notifications are on and everything. At least they should be working just fine. But if you want to send in a super chat, we are going to be donating to a charitable cause this month. We haven't exactly nailed down what charitable cause we're going to be going with, but it's you know, we typically donate to really good causes.
Maybe you should quit drinking all that beer, G.
Rudy Kisley says, "Happy Rama Damma Ding Dan." All right, thank you there, Rudy. I'm not sure why I didn't give you the going to hell one. For some reason that one pops up. I don't know if I fucked up the settings or something, but Rudy's on the highway to hell. But anyways, so a portion of all super chats, memberships, and any of the revenue that we make here on Godless Engineer are going to be going to a charity. So if you would like to send in a super chat to, you know, throw your 2 cents in on the conversations that we're going to be having tonight, then please do that. Know that a portion of it is going to be going to a good cause. All right, so first up on how we just do shit here is Today I Learned. Y'all ready to learn some shit? Sorry, I had to pull the uke out of the dusty pile of props over there. All right, you ready? All right, here we go. Today I learned. Woo-hoo! All right. I don't know if you guys saw the news today, but today I learned that the Florida Education Agency rejects math books it claims contains critical race theory. So apparently they've in Florida, they've had to reject a number of books, and it includes banned topics, including critical race theory. It's kind of curious how they pointed out that one thing, but it was like a multitude of different topics, apparently, that were causing them to be banned. But, you know, Florida is just looking worse and worse. Like, I don't know why Alabama gets such a bad rap when Florida exists. You know, I mean, is it just because they do crazy shit we can laugh at all the time? They can both be bad, but we're in a race to not be the worst. I mean, as Alabamians, well, I'm an Alabamian. Yeah, you're from Alabama too.
No, I'm not from Alabama.
No. She's a transport Alabamian. Anyways, I feel like we are on a race to not be the worst state in the continental U.S. I should hope. Hey, you know what? That is right. We do have age limits for marriage, but we don't have any social stigma for kissing our cousins. So, I mean, I feel like the age limit for marriage is worse. Like, doing away with that. Like, I feel like that's worse than, like, maybe kissing your cousin. I don't know. Anyways, there you go. Florida, which, you know, most of the time, these, like, Republicans or conservatives in general don't understand what critical race theory is. I don't know how they would work that into a math book, but apparently they perceive it to be about math, or they perceive the math books to be teaching critical race theory. I don't know how that works. Maybe there were some word problems that were a bit dicey for them, Like, you know what? This points out too much of our racist past here. Maybe we shouldn't include this, or else the kids will think a bit too hard.
Just a little bit of money.
Jester did a super chat saying at least they aren't trying to give you over to Mexico. I'm not sure what that means. To give us over to Mexico. Oh, because everybody just wants Texas to just go away and be given back to Mexico, I guess. I don't know. I mean, considering the history, that would make sense. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're not being thrown back to. I don't think we were owned by anybody other than Native Americans. Anyways, another topic. Also today I learned that a Tennessee state senator offers Hitler as an inspiration to homeless people. So, I mean, what the argument that I actually listened to the argument that he made. And basically what he says is that Hitler became homeless of his own volition so that he could work on his oration skills to convince people to follow him. And they were making some kind of law about the homeless or whatnot, but he immediately goes to a Hitler analogy for the homeless, like comparing the homeless to Hitler. And I guess saying that, it's of their own volition or something like that, or they're choosing to be this way because they could definitely go to genocide like entire groups of people, I guess. I don't know. Like, I really don't see in America a homeless person ever arising to the point where they could be president. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, it was a dumb fucking argument, but it's Tennessee. They want to be able to marry 6-year-olds up there. Next up is some more sad news. Today I learned that America is the only country in the world where 700 billionaires can become 1.7 trillion richer during the pandemic and pay lower tax rate than a nurse, while 46 million owe 1.7 trillion in student debt, 113 million struggle to pay for healthcare, and 600,000 are homeless. Like, that's a good rundown of how sad America is as far as the economy goes right here. We got Zach Clark with a member milestone chat saying, first time catching you live in a while. Glad to have been here for over a year now. Woo woo! Way to go there, Zach. See, Vanta said in the chat, also, the guy got noted down in history, so that's good, right? Apparently. But I feel like this is a pretty good summary of how of the state of like America as far as like the economy goes right now. In this particular aspect, I think it's kind of spot on there. All right, that's gonna be it for all of the Today I Learns. But you know what we got next? Comments of the day. Prepare to face palm yourself into next week.
Hey, ain't nobody gonna be fighting over
I don't
this
know how well that
$5.
played
It's
out.
all
Oh, look, who's your
mine.
buddy? Who's your buddy says that's capitalism. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Yeah, that's actually very correct right there. All right, first on the comments is something somebody sent in a while back, but I figured since we're talking, historical Jesus stuff tonight, we might want to discuss this. So, that's okay. Mushu commented on somebody's YouTube channel saying, like Jesus actually exists, and no seriously taken scholar says otherwise. People who claim Jesus never existed are an extreme minority in the historical community due to the overwhelming amount of evidence for his existence. There wasn't even enough time to have legendary development of that scale. So working backwards here, that last point's pretty bullshit, because if you just look at the UFO community, the UFO abductee community, especially, but if you look at that community, you have some like weird military aircraft that crash lands in a desert in New Mexico, and like just in a matter of like decades, like that was 1947. In a matter of 30 years, it was a full-blown conspiracy by the 70s, with people making up crop circles to, fuel the whole UFO thing. You've also got people being abducted. You've got an entire conspiracy theory around the US government finding dead alien bodies at the crash site and hiding them at Area 51. And you've got all of this stuff that gets blown out of proportion at a time when, if it was false, it should be easily proven false. But it wasn't. So that last part's kind of bullshit right there. As far as the extensive evidence of his existence, and that's why the historical community accepts his existence, I have to call bullshit on that as well. The vast majority of historians that exist out there are not going to have a focus in first century Jewish Christian history. Okay? So there's that. The only ones that are really looking into the whole historical Jesus topic, trying to describe a historical Jesus, are the New Testament scholars. Who are the New Testament scholars? The New Testament scholars are a majority Christian. And so with the majority of them being Christian, of course they're going to think that Jesus existed in history. So the historical authorities outside of New Testament studies are going to look to New Testament studies to inform themselves about what the current consensus is, considering that the current consensus is controlled by Christians who definitely think that Jesus was historical. Damn the evidence. They are going to be the ones to set the tone for the rest of the historical community. So what does this mean? This means that we have to look at the actual evidence that they have, which plays into another part of this, being that we don't have extensive historical information about it. And we'll be covering that later on in the live stream tonight. And then the whole no seriously taken scholar says otherwise. This is a thought-stopping technique. They don't want you to think about the question because it's uncomfortable for them. And they, like, if somebody doesn't have some kind of religious or theological tie to the idea that Jesus existed, then they have just heard this repeated by people that they think don't have that kind of tie to the idea. And so they've learned this thought-stopping technique. Anytime anybody says, no, seriously, taken scholar says this, then I think that it's time for you to question it. I don't know if people have watched the movie Spotlight, but they were wanting people not to ask questions about pedophilia in the church, but luckily they flipped them a big bird and they said, fuck you, and they went ahead and asked the questions anyways. So there you go. That was a... I can breathe now. Thorough debunking of that particular comment. All right, next up is another comment about the historical Jesus. This person right here says, I haven't read all of what mythicists said or believe, but I don't think you need to look very deep into the argument to know how fringe it actually is. First off, doesn't matter if it's fringe. Technically, being thinking that the resurrection is ahistorical is a fringe position in the realm of New Testament scholars. Because most New Testament scholars are Christian, and most of those people are going to affirm that the resurrection historically happened. So saying that the resurrection didn't happen is actually also a fringe position. So I don't really want to hear anything about mythicism being a fringe position. Next, they say mythicists go against the majority of scholars who all agree Jesus Christ existed. Yes, I definitely disagree with Christians who think that their Gospels and everything like that are historical documents, because they're not. All right, next up, how would everybody read this? Because there's like two ways in which you could read it. You could read it like normal, left to right, and it comes out, this Jesus cowboy, his wife loves his kids. I mean, regardless of whether or not the wife is the parent of those kids, like the biological parent of those kids, I would hope that a guy's wife would love the kids. But then you could also read it, this cowboy loves Jesus, his wife, his kids. So without the commas here, it kind of seems like he's saying that he loves Jesus's wife, and his wife and his kids. I don't know. This is very confusing just in general. I don't know. I feel this is a failure of the public school system right here, or the private school system. Hell, I don't know. I don't know where the fuck this person went to school at. He's just an asshat. Is that what he is, hon? This next one's pretty good. Something we can all get behind, I feel like. Here we go. Why don't the atheists have their own language? Why are they speaking our religious languages? Yeah. Christians speak English, Muslims speak Arabic, and Jews speak Hebrew. So why are atheists speaking the God's languages? I find it interesting how they said the God's language, as if there's multiple gods that definitely exist. Also, I don't think God owns language at all. Yeah, that's right. God did do that, but I don't. As far as the Bible goes, in reality, we obviously developed our own language. But I mean, I guess I just don't understand why they think the Tower of Babel is literal. I kind of feel like most people should understand that it's not. Like, yeah. That's a good point. Early Christians did not speak English. Early Christians would have spoke Aramaic and then Greek. They also spoke Latin and other languages of that sort. Before Islam, they would have spoken Arabic. That's a good point. Yeah. Jason Kolosik says, "I speak American." Brocephus. We're actually going to get a visit from Brocephus tonight. I mean, I told him earlier, so hopefully he'll be up here. I got the notifications on, but for some reason it's not popping up for maybe it already popped up and I just wasn't looking. Thank you, Jason, for your super chat there. All right. So next up is Frank Turek. You're going to love this one, hon. Frank says, there are a couple of passages in the New Testament, such as Mark 16:9-20, and the story of the woman caught in adultery in John 7:53 to 8:11, which are not found in some of the earliest manuscripts. Does this impact the message or reliability of the Gospels? Frank says, no way. So here's my thing. If people were able to insert those things into the gospel message without anybody really blinking an eye, not knowing it.
Hey, y'all know what? Anytime is a good time for a beer.
Yeah, that's Jason's. Yeah, that was really delayed. So the fact that people were able to slip these in without anybody noticing until later textual analysis has proven that they didn't originally appear there, I think you have to admit that we don't actually know what was originally in the Gospels or in any of the books of the Bible, because they could have been easily interpolated. Like, there's a lot of books in the Bible that are actually written to make it look like they were written by Paul, but they weren't actually written by Paul. And we could tell that through textual analysis. Also, there's plenty of interpolations that have been worked into Paul's writings. So we actually don't know what the original first texts were in the beginning of Christianity. We just simply don't know. And I feel like if you don't know what was there, then you can't say what was or wasn't there. We can only say what was added after the 3rd century, because that's when our first full manuscripts appear. And so we don't know what happened. There's this lead curtain prior to the 3rd century that we just don't know what in the fuck was there. Let's call it turfuckity. That's a funny word. All right, so that's Frank Turek. And here's going to be our last comment for the night before we get into the shitty ass science. So we got Greg Bonson, who says Christ's impact on this earth is definitely an attestation to his deity, the truth of his message. Oh,
2 Timothy, what the fuck ever? Shut the fuck up.
Daniel M says, I'm a little late. David says, good night. Now GE needs to go back and give a recap. Lol, just kidding. Good night, David. I hope you have an awesome night and weekend there, bud. And I guess we'll see you next week. I hope you have a great time this weekend, however y'all celebrate there, Daniel. All right. So I don't think that Christ had much of an impact, like as a historical figure. And I definitely don't think that even if he was a historical figure, anything about him attests to his deity-ness, deity, whether or not he was a deity. I don't think that anything, attests to that. The only things that we know are that Paul was convinced of the Christian message sometime after he started persecuting Christians. And there were other Christians that were convinced by hallucinations just like Paul was. So it doesn't really seem like Christ had all that much of an impact. If you had to say anybody had an impact, I'd say that it was the first apostles like Paul and Peter, James the Pillar. Those people that initially spread the religion are the ones that actually had an impact on the world, not Jesus necessarily. So there's that. All right, are you guys ready to get to Brocephus? Yeah? Yes, science. Oh, shit. Down there getting my buzz on. Now I gotta do shit. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be talking about. Look, Casey, can you please just remind GE over there that I require at least 2 days' notice to get my bullshit correct? Friday. He didn't have me last week. You know, it's neither here nor there how many whiskeys I had, okay? Judging me for my drunkenness. I'm drinking his drink, too. Interrupting my drink on. Anyways, what do we got tonight? Let's see. Why does this plastic container only harm me if I'm in California? For California customers, warning, cancer and reproductive harm. Holy fuck, what happens to this material? This plastic, holy shit. I don't know what's in there, but apparently, California must have stopped existing in about 1965. Okay, because listen, if you think about it, if California doesn't exist, but we think it exists because we immediately get transferred into an alternate dimension where this material right here becomes radioactive, causes you to have mutant sperm and I guess eggs, ovaries, whatever. It causes them to mutate and everything, and you get testicular cancer or whatever other kind of cancer. Like immediately you're carrying this in your car and then it just goes, you're fucked, and you're just dead. I mean, it's either that or these are shavings from the Ark of the Covenant, and because you remove them from its resting place over there in the Middle East, you now have dick cancer, just like the Bible says. It's, I don't know, Deuteronomy, Ezra 369 or something like that. It basically says that if you take the Ark, I'm going to give you dick cancer. That's what God said. So these must be shavings of the original Ark that left Israel. But God, in his omnipresent ways, can only detect it in California. For some reason, God's gaze is only upon California right now. Maybe he switches around every 1,000 years or so, but he's looking at California. And so if he sees you with this shit in California, you're going to get dick cancer, okay? I'm just saying, like, that's the only thing that makes sense. Because why else would California be the one nexus for this nuclear, cancerous, and reproductive fuckery? Like, why else? I have no idea. Why is California so super fucking special? Why can you bring that shit to Alabama and everybody's like, hey, it's just like rice cakes. Go on ahead and eat it. Shove it up your bunghole or something. I don't know. But it seems like it's perfectly fine for use elsewhere, so don't go to California with this particular... What is this, cheese? Plastic? I do remember the plastic plaster ornaments y'all made, and I was thoroughly confused then as to why the plaster ornament was going to give us cancer, but only in California. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know whether I should put my hand in there or not, because I don't know if I'm going to be going to California anytime soon. Might have some residue on my hands that'll give me dick cancer. Don't make any kind of assumptions about why I would have dick cancer if it's on my hands, okay? Just going to leave it at that. I will see you heathens later. Y'all need to ask further questions. Remember, don't ask questions. That's the motto of Christianity. Bye, y'all. Fuck, what the hell? What? Why isn't my thing? There we go. Bro, Cephas, don't you touch me with that hand, bro. Listen, just don't. I'm gonna go get drunk. Whatever. I'm gonna go eat pizza and drink beer. Yeah. I feel like I need... I don't know what kind of, like, shit he has on here. Anyways. I, too, am thoroughly confused by why California is so special that certain things, certain plastics or plasters, when you go there, it'll give you cancer, or potentially can give you cancer. I mean, you would think that if it happens in... if it happens in California, it could definitely happen elsewhere, but apparently the Californians are hip to something that we just don't fucking know about here in Alabama. She said, Brocephus, drink out of my cup. I might have dick cancer now, I guess. Oh, anyways, Julian subscribed to talk some shit in the chat right now. All right, so we need to get to the super serious response video now, so we don't make a fool out of, you know, everybody. TV had to load there for a second. All right, so tonight we're going to be discussing Kirk Cameron, known as the star from, what was it? Somebody Saves Christmas. Kirk Saves Christmas. Saving Christmas. The star, the world-renowned star of Saving Christmas, Kirk Cameron, is talking to Sean McDowell. And Sean McDowell has, been putting out a lot of apologetic stuff here on YouTube and everything. He's pretty popular with Christians nowadays. But Sean McDowell is going to be giving us his evidence for a historical Jesus. And so we're going to see where he's going to go with this and why I think that he's wrong. So I feel like what I need to do for these types of videos that the Mafia picks, I feel like what I need to do is like do a bingo card that has all of the general like historical arguments that have already been debunked by New Testament scholars themselves, and just like hit it. So, okay, let's see what Sean McDowell has as far as evidence for a historical Jesus. Now, I do want to preface something here, and that's when we're talking about the historical Jesus, we're foregoing the idea of the magical Jesus. We're not talking about that. We know that Jesus doesn't exist for all intents and purposes. Like, it's just not likely that he does. And I feel like most, if not all, atheists would agree to that. I mean, I feel like all would, but whatever. Daniel M says Kirk Cameron is a complete tool. I disagree there, Daniel. Tools are useful. I didn't come up with that on my own, but I am the only one laughing. Oh, okay. Sorry. I got this thing in my ear and it... Anyways.
Hey,
Okay.
I don't know if y'all know this, but every time you donate, the Lord cries.
Oh, great. The Lord's crying. All right. So we're definitely foregoing with the whole magical Jesus thing. The historical Jesus that we're concerned about is a rabbi, an itinerant rabbi in the 1st century who gathered a bunch of disciples. He went around doing, I guess performing, I can't do doing, magic tricks and shit. And he angered the Sanhedrin enough to convince the Romans that he needs to be crucified for sedition or claiming to be king or whatever. And so he was crucified and everything like that. So that's the kind of historical Jesus we're looking for, because that is the historical Jesus that people like Bart Ehrman subscribe to. And like, for instance, Bart Ehrman thinks that Jesus was definitely born in Nazareth, but he thinks that Bethlehem was made up because of prophecies. So this Jesus has to be from Nazareth. Daniel says true. He's as useful as a poopy flavored lollipop. Yes, he is definitely a shit lollipop. That's right. What were you saying about professionalism earlier, hun? Professional here on the GE channel. All right. So now that we've defined what we're looking for, at least evidence of what we're looking for, let's venture into this shit show.
The idea that Jesus didn't exist just bumps up against all the gospel accounts we have, the other New Testament writings, the other Christian writers outside of the Bible like Ignatius and Polycarp, Clement of Rome, etc., that are early, and the non-Christian writings.
Who all claim that this Jesus was a real person.
Yeah, there are some good challenges to the Christian faith we should take.
Let's see. Hold on. This is the very beginning, and there you go. There's the title card.
Sean, one of the arguments that I was wrestling with as a prospective believer was, well, if this resurrection did not happen, then what do I do with my sin problem?
Hey,
Once
shit. This person just bought you a beer.
Thank you there, Daniel. my notifications are working a lot like Internet Explorer tonight. Slow as fuck. All right. So Kirk Cameron wants to know, if the resurrection didn't happen, well, what does he do with his sin problem? Well, if the resurrection didn't happen, but you're still I don't understand why you would be a Christian and not think that the resurrection happened, but that's neither here nor there. But you have to understand that sin is something that's created by the God in the Jewish and Christian faith. And it's what it essentially boils down to is God's opinion. Like, if you do something that God doesn't like, then that's a sin and you deserve to go to hell for it. So, various people have different ways of interpreting what God does and doesn't like, or does and doesn't want you to do. And so that's where you get the different denominations. That's where you get the different theologies that exist within Christianity. So, what it boils down to is that God seems to have this opinion that you should go to hell if you transgress his will. If you do that without begging for forgiveness, or I guess taking a bath in the blood of Jesus and washing away God's opinion about you, then you get burnt in hell for, reasons. So if you don't think, if the resurrection didn't historically happen, and you don't believe in this God's opinion, then it seems like you don't have sin. And I feel like that's an easier way to deal with the sin problem, and just hold yourself accountable and just realize that we all make up our own moral compasses. We have our own moral foundations that we develop throughout our lifetime. I feel like that's an easier way to deal with that particular issue than to just be like, I have to believe in the resurrection. We have Uhan did a member chat saying free super chat. Yay! Thank you so much for being here, Uhan. Kevin Baylor sent in a super chat just for shits and giggles. Thank you so much there, Kevin.
Maybe you should quit drinking all that beer, G.
Maybe I won't.
I understood that I had offended a holy God. I didn't need anyone to convince me of that. My own conscience was just giving me lots of evidence, all the bad things that I had done. Even though I didn't believe in God, I knew that something had to be done if God did exist.
But I mean, Judaism had already provided a solution for that. I mean, once a year, you slaughter a goat and spread its entrails on the temple, and then you sprinkle its blood all over the God's living room. Like, I feel like they've already had a solution in place. Now, of course, Christianity came around and was like, well, let's do some human blood magic, and we'll just wash that shit right out there forever. And so it's just a different solution to it. But I mean, to act like there was no solution to sin before Christianity is just totally ignoring the entire Jewish faith. We got Uhan Roderick that says, but that's just like God's opinion. Plus, sin typically,
donating this much only makes me drink more.
So I feel like Uhan was saying that first sentence in like a dude accent. So it's like, but that's just like, God's opinion. And then he says, plus sin typically includes all the stuff that makes life just a bit more enjoyable. I agree. That the stuff considered to be sin is stuff that makes life enjoyable, but that's also bad for God. God doesn't want you to enjoy this life. God wants you to enjoy his glory. Jester, Lord of Fools, says it sounds easier than human sacrifice, actually. I mean, you would think so, but, whatever.
Just a little bit of money.
Little bit of fucking money, that's right. Okay.
Because I had offended him. And I thought, well, what else am I going to do if I don't have a resurrected Jesus? Am I just going to try to clean up my act? Well, I know that doesn't work.
Wait a second. Just you on your own cleaning up your act doesn't work? Like, don't people do that all the fucking time? I mean, sure, some people need religion or something higher than them in order to change themselves, right? But I really don't think that there's just no solution unless there's Jesus dying on the cross. Like, I find it ridiculous to think that you can't just change yourself. It's like, I have no willpower. I can't do things on my own. I need Jesus to help me do everything in my life. When I cook eggs in the morning, fucking Jesus is right there helping me flipping shit.
Join some other religion? Well, ultimately, there's no solution for my sin. I found that to be a powerful argument.
I mean, essentially, what Kirk Cameron is saying here is that if you're a Christian, or I guess maybe a Jew as well, if you believe God, if you believe that God has forced this sin on you, like sin exists because God says it exists, so you either are a Christian or a Jew, and you don't believe in the resurrection, he's acting like, oh, well, what do I do now that I believe in this God that's very specific here, but I don't completely believe in everything about the religion? Like, I feel like if you're going to say you're a Christian, you've already affirmed that you believe in the resurrection. I mean, I don't understand why you would call yourself a Christian or believe in Yahweh unless you already adhere to the Jewish resolution of sins or the Christian resolution of sins. Like, he's proposing this situation that just simply doesn't happen.
The other argument was from your dad's book, More Than a Carpenter, and it's the trilemma article. So he sort of took dilemma, riffing off of the word die to a trilemma, and said, well, Jesus said such outlandish things like, the Father and I are one. He said that he was the Son of God who was going to rise from the grave. He was the fulfillment of all of this prophecy. He was either a liar, or he was a lunatic, or he was the Lord. He really is who he said he was. And he went through the evidences of those and convinced me that it was very unlikely that Jesus lied. Like, why would you go to the cross and be crucified and lie about the whole thing? I mean, like, you know, there was no back-end deal with the Pharisees.
Right.
There was no book publishing deal when you're dead on the cross. And as far as a lunatic, I mean, mental health experts today would look at the Sermon on the Mount and say, this is the most mentally well-balanced man that ever lived.
So,
You know, donating this much only makes me drink more.
Mathwiz says, how does he know Jesus even made that claim in the first place? Yeah, that's a good point. We don't know, because we don't know anything that Jesus said, even if he was historical, because nobody actually records any of Jesus's words. But second, he says anybody that reads the Sermon on the Mount would know that Jesus was not a lunatic. Like, that's the most stable person in all of history. Forego the armchair psychology from 2,000 years in the future, but let's just focus on the fact that the Sermon on the Mount was nothing that Jesus said. That was totally invented by later authors of the Gospels. For one thing, Paul never gives us any kind of indication that Jesus said any of these things, even if he was historical. But Paul only reports visions of Jesus and not really seeing Jesus, and he never reports anybody being a disciple, so there's literally no way to connect the Sermon on the Mount to a historical Jesus. So that's for one. For two, if there was an itinerant rabbi going around saying that he's the Son of God, he thinks he's performing miracles when he's really not, he's spitting in people's eye and then rubbing dirt in it and acting like they got cured of their blindness. I mean, if he's doing all of these things, it does seem like lunatic-y, doesn't it? So, I mean, if there was a historical Jesus and he was going around doing those things, then he definitely would fit the bill for a fucking lunatic. I mean, lunatics, as far as we understand, like crazy people or schizophrenics or schizotypals, they would have been readily accepted by religious groups. We've seen studies now that have actually looked into this phenomena and have found that people that are schizotypal or schizophrenics in general are readily accepted by these fanatical religious groups, which is what Christianity was in the first century. So it kind of seems like lunatic would be the best fit for a historical Jesus amongst those three, this trichotomy that they built here, which I think that is kind of a false trichotomy, I guess, but he's about to get to that here in a second.
Love your enemies kind of thing. I mean, this guy was like,
Powerful.
So what's left? He must have been who he said he was. I found that very powerful. But your dad updated the book and he added a fourth option, which was
The legend option. So it's Lord, liar, lunatic, legend. And I think the heart of what you're getting at this argument is, and what C.S. Lewis talked about it through the history of the church, there's been a lot of writers trying to say, if Jesus really claimed to be God, had the authority to forgive sins, said, I and the Father are one, there's only so many options we have to conclude about the person of Jesus.
What kind of guy would say that?
Right, that's the question. And we rule out liar, we rule out lunatic, but more recently, people said, well, what about legend? And this can mean one.
So, as far as legend goes, I think that the Gospels do have some legendary accretion on them. But I mean, we have legends of real historical people in the past. So I feel like legend comes with a certain nuance there, in that the person thinks that to be legendary means that you never, like like the event or the person never existed or something like that, which I would think that mythical would be a better word to use there, but it also doesn't go in with his whole theme, because liar, lunatic, lord, legend. I can understand why he did it, but I think that it introduces um some nuance that people don't often think about. But in any case, I'll let Sean continue.
One of two things. It could be that Jesus really existed, but these stories crop up later about resurrections and walking on water, so we can't trust that.
Kind of like there was a real Saint Nicholas, but he doesn't really ride on a sleigh with reindeer pulling it.
Exactly. That's one option. The other one is this more mythical view that it's entirely legend.
That Jesus never even existed.
Jesus never existed. And that has gotten a lot of traction on the internet.
I disagree. Fuck, I don't have my books. They're behind me on the bookshelf. There's currently 2 books in the scholarship that has been peer reviewed. So that means that it's no longer just like an internet. Are you gonna go get them? Okay. They are they're no longer like only discussed on the internet or by lay people or non-historians. These are 2 historians that have that have entered into the fray, entered into the discussion with peer-reviewed material. So this is actively, thank you, honey. These 2 books right here. So you've got On the Historicity of Jesus, which goes full mythicist, and then you've got Questioning the Historicity of Jesus by Raphael Lataster, who stays agnostic.
Here comes the gravy train.
Thank you, Uhan. Uhan says, got to take off, long day tomorrow. Take a moment and check in on a friend, a family member, anyone. Let someone know you're there for them. No one is alone. Love you guys. Oh, I got high. Hey, that's I'd rather it be going high right now than for it to be dipping low. Thank you, Uhan. You have a great weekend there, dude. And I'll see you around, okay, bud. But anyways, so 2 historians have had their work peer reviewed, and they are in the discussion. And it really perplexes me as to why nobody is interacting with the most recent scholarship. And I'm not just talking about Lataster and Carrier's work. They refuse to interact with most recent scholarship from their own camp. Like the most recent scholarship on the interpolation of 1 Thessalonians in Paul. They ignore work. They ignore information that's directly in the Bible in order to make their case. So I don't understand why they refuse to interact with the honest evidence that exists on both sides of the conversation. But alas, they refuse to interact with it.
Because everybody has a microphone today, can make claims that Jesus didn't exist. When we talk about legend like St. Nick, one of the problems is we have such early evidence for the identity and resurrection of Jesus. So 1 Corinthians 15, a letter Paul wrote to the church in Corinth in the mid-50s. In chapter 15, he says, I pass on to you, the Christians in Corinth, what had been passed on to me, that Jesus died, buried, rose on the 3rd day, and appeared to people.
Okay. I have to take a second and just show how dubious Sean McDowell is being here, because he is being very dubious. Let's see, 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8. Okay, let's go with the ESV. That's a really good translation to use. And let me just get the window capture. Shit. Okay, so here it is. 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through it. I want you to notice what Sean leaves out here, okay? For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me. So now it says right here, in accordance with the scriptures, which is actually the people that wrote the ESV translation. They took it upon themselves to change the words and in a subtle way to make it seem like Jesus did these things that were also, and it was confirmed by the scriptures. But if you'll go, let's see, let's go to the King James version. Nope, not King James 21st century, whatever. KJV. If you'll notice right here, it says that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures. So it's a subtle change, but it's an important change, and it's a thing that Sean McDowell fails to point out, is that Christ's death, burial, and resurrection were all according to the scriptures. That's all Paul gives us. The only way that Paul knows that these things happened are because of the scriptures. Paul also had visions of a resurrected Jesus, meaning that he had hallucinations of Jesus. For whatever reason, I don't know. I'm not here to armchair psychoanalyze Paul in the first century, but if he was seeing a Jesus that he thought was physical and corporeal, then it was probably a hallucination. All right? So, in order to make his case, Sean McDowell has to leave out a portion of the biblical verses so that you don't understand that Paul was attributing all this information to the scriptures.
That is a creed that was given to Paul that he inserts in his letter that predates that letter in the mid-50s. Now, I think scholars can make a very good case that that creed itself traces back to within 3 to 5 years of the death of Jesus.
There's a little bit of assumption piled onto this particular point, because the assumption is that just because you can date that creed to be earlier, that means that there's some kind of firm date for the death of Jesus. There is no firm date for the death of Jesus. Saying that it dates till like the early 30s or late 20s, I think could be reasonable, considering when Paul says that he, became a Christian. But saying that it occurred 3 years after Jesus supposedly died, you don't know when he died. There's no accurate account of when he died. And so there's no way that you can know that it dates to within 3 years of his supposed death. So he's adding a lot of information onto here that's external to Paul. He's inserting that in there, and he's misrepresenting it to his audience.
So what that tells us, this idea that Jesus died, buried, resurrected, and appeared to people is not appearing decades or centuries later.
As some legend that was made up over time and embellished.
No way. The earliest heart of the message we have always is that to believe in Jesus is to believe that he conquered the grave, that he has resurrected. So I think we can rule out that from 1 Corinthians 15. The idea.
Well, all that we can say with 1 Corinthians 15 is that the belief arose in the early part of the first century. That doesn't actually get us to a death or a burial or a resurrection. So all it says is that this belief arose, and that's it. That's all. So I don't understand how you could sit there and act like it definitely solidifies that Jesus died and was resurrected. I mean, they believe that happened, but that doesn't mean that it actually happened.
That Jesus didn't exist just bumps up against all the gospel accounts we have, the other New Testament writings, the other Christian writers outside of the Bible like Ignatius and Polycarp, Clement of Rome, etc., that are early, and the non-Christian writings.
Who all claim that this Jesus was a real person.
Yeah, there are some good.
So he's about to kind of cover some of them, but just to preface here, all of the extra biblical like sources about Jesus, they all rely on the biblical sources. So it ultimately all relies on the Bible as far as proof that Jesus existed.
Good challenges to the Christian faith we should take seriously, but the idea that Jesus didn't exist is not one that even most critical scholars would embrace.
Sean, what?
By most critical scholars, I wonder if he means just like the secular scholars that exist in the field. But even so, those critical scholars are still controlled in at least a small portion or a small bit by the majority Christian consensus, because there's this majority Christian consensus that exists, and if you stray too far from that line, you will be phased out of that community. And because your entire profession is built upon having a place in that community, you essentially can't do anything with your profession. You can't be hired anywhere or anything like that. We have several examples of this happening in the past. Like Thomas Brody came out as mythicist. He's a Christian, but he's also a mythicist, and he was fired from a school that he helped create. He built it, and he was fired from it because he became a mythicist. He no longer believed in a historical Jesus. And even more mainstream than that, you've got Mike Licona, who lost 2 jobs and several speaking engagements because he just simply said that the zombie walk that occurred after Jesus's death in Matthew was not literal. It was like what do you say? Apocalyptic imagery is what he felt like that was. And so he lost jobs for that. He lost different speaking engagements that he was supposed to be a part of. He was punished for taking that kind of position. To his credit, he didn't back down from it. But at the same time, that's the kind of backlash you should expect if you're going to be a New Testament scholar and you're hoping to bring some fair criticism to the field. So, yeah.
What do you attribute the longevity of the spread of the gospel to? I mean, people have been talking about this resurrected Jesus for over 2,000 years.
So I think it's 2 things. I think part of it is the Christians very early took seriously the spread of this message, writing books, becoming missionaries, copying the Bible more frequently and carefully than any other ancient book. So
I mean, that describes later Christian scribes. Like when you're talking about like the 3rd century and on. That's who he's talking about. When we're talking about the early copyists of the Bibles, people that were early copying them, they were not trained as professionally as later scribes would be. So they definitely made a whole lot more mistakes. And as we showed earlier, you can easily insert information into these texts and nobody would bat an eye. So, I mean, the early copyists were not that well trained. To assume that they were is being anachronistic.
part of it is the transmission. I think the other part is the heart of the message. The idea that God entered into history through the person of Jesus, lived a sinless life, defeated death. And that means you and I can be forgiven. They call it the gospel for a reason because it's good news. We see this all over film, like even in like superhero movies, like the superhero will lay down his or her life, come back from the grave as this act of sacrifice. This is all over fiction.
Yes, it is. Now, if you could just make that connection there, Sean. It's all over fiction. This shit is easy to make up. It's easy to make up a superhero story where the person saves us all, even though he ends up dying, but he comes back to life and he saves the day. This is easy shit to make up. Just make that connection.
But the claim of the Christians is this actually took place in history.
Oh, well, fuck me in the asshole. Because obviously, this is the one special case in history. This is the one time it really happened. Never mind all the times that it supposedly happened before, but those were bullshit. Never mind all the times that happened after. Those were bullshit too. This is the one time that it actually happened because reasons. Don't question it. Just accept it. That's what most New Testament scholars say.
And that means you and I have been forgiven. We don't have to fear the grave. Death is not the end. We have the power of forgiveness and the power of the cross inside of us. That's what I think when people hear it and they understand it, it's a message when you get it, you can't help but tell somebody else if you've experienced that in your own life.
So basically what he's saying here is that there's this appeal to emotion in the story of Jesus that compels people to tell others about Jesus. How does this speak to the truth of Christianity? How does this speak to the historical nature of Jesus? I don't think that this appeal to emotion is all that convincing to an outsider who doesn't get this kind of emotional reaction to God being unable to figure out a better solution for changing his opinion than slaughtering his own son and demanding people eat his flesh, drink his blood, and then bathe in it. In his blood, that is. Like, the fact that God couldn't come up with a better way to change his opinion about things. And I mean, I feel like that the only emotional reaction that causes is like awe, but awe in the way of like, oh.
That's why Christians are like, we're going to the Lions for this message. We're going to go care for people who are sick. Even if we get sick and die, Jesus has conquered the grave. So it's a message that changes lives. And so people have been telling this message across language, across continent, since the time that Jesus came, and there's no indication that it's slowing down.
There's no indication that it's slowing down? Have you looked at the latest poll numbers for your religion? The nuns group is growing, while the especially the evangelicals and Catholic, like across the board, religiosity is dropping, while irreligiosity is rising. What do you mean that it's not having an effect? Like, it's not stopping anytime soon. I mean, we're seeing people question these things a lot more now than we used to. I mean, if you really had to take two different data points, one being like, let's say 1950s USA, and then now, you could tell that we're definitely a lot more irreligious than we were in the 1950s. So I don't want to hear this shit about how it's not showing signs of stopping or anything like that. You have to understand that the religiosity, at least in America, is dropping significantly when you look at it over long time periods.
Sean, I'm thinking of somebody who could be watching this conversation right now going, you know what, this is great. I've never heard people talk about this kind of thing before. Then there's really answers to these questions. I wonder.
I mean, Sean didn't bring up really one piece of evidence whatsoever in all of this. I mean, he said that there's a lot of early attestation. What early attestation? You have Paul, who's writing in the 50s and claiming that Jesus appeared to him in a vision and he really read the scriptures a lot. And you know, he made some shit up about Jesus. You got that. And then everything else is dependent upon Paul. So you really only have Paul. Now, Bart Ehrman, he would argue that there's Mark, the Q source, the M source, and the L source. So that's 4 more sources, making it 5 sources early. And then Bart Ehrman would also tag on there or whatever. He would say Josephus is another one, and I'm not sure if he uses Tacitus, but that would be another one that people generally put in there. I don't know if Bart Ehrman puts him in there. But let's go with the 6 that I know. So he claims that there's 6. Normally Bart Ehrman says that there's like 12 early sources for Jesus. And I really can't get past the one source that we actually have.
Though, if there's somebody who's watching who grew up in the church and maybe their mom or their dad was a respected leader, and so they never felt like they could really question this stuff and embarrass their parents or ruin their legacy or something like that, you can speak to them with qualifications that I can't.
Thank you so much, Kurt, for making my point for me. Okay? Because he just made the point that there are people out there that are too scared to ask questions. Now, for atheists in general, these questions would amount to questioning the historicity of the Bible or questioning the historicity of what the Bible teaches and questioning the historicity of the Old Testament. These are the general things that you start out questioning. And you're trying to tell me that you piling on the anxiety was saying no serious scholar questions this. Do you honestly think that's a good tactic to pile that on there? And I think it's fantabulous that Kirk Cameron is making my point for me with the whole don't question this thing kind of shit. I mean, it's rampant throughout this entire topic. Don't question. Anybody tells you don't question something, that's the first thing you should fucking do.
I was an atheist. I didn't grow up like that. And so I didn't have any skin in the game to ask all of the questions. Would you just talk to the person who's watching in that camera right over there and just explain to them why they really need the resurrection?
First off, I understand that concern that you don't want to ask questions and undermine like a faith that's been passed on to you. But let me tell you something, God is big enough for your questions. In the book of Jude, it says,
Wait a second. God is big enough for your questions? Are you sure you want to test that? Here's a question. How does God feel about iron chariots? Boo! God can't do shit against iron chariots. God sees an iron chariot rolling by and God's like, I ain't fucking with that, yo. You're on your own, okay? We all know iron fucks me up, so I'm just gonna get on out of here. Jason Kolosik says lying is always a good tactic for this crew. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say that Sean is lying about anything necessarily. I think that Sean,
just a little bit of money.
I think that Sean perfectly crafts his content and the things that he says so that he can be persuasive to a very specific audience that he wants to reach. And like throwing in according to the scriptures, while most of the audience is not going to question that. They're just going to pass by and they're not going to think about it. But he's thinking ahead and he's like, I don't want to give them a reason to question these things. And so he leaves it out. Either that or he forgot it. But I'm not sure if lying about it is necessarily the way to put it, because that kind of imports intent. But I can definitely see how some people might view it as lying. Because people like Sean McDowell that have studied this material enough should know what 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8 says. He should know that. And he should know what it means. But he chooses to represent it a different way. So I could definitely sympathize with seeing it that way. But I guess I'm just more apt to give him the benefit of the doubt. We got Belle Gareth, who says God is a fakend. Would explain a lot. What is it? What is the fakend? Fakend. Fakend? Fakend. Fakend are a species of humanoids who have extra abilities with nature. Yeah.
Today I learned that atheists sacrifice babies on Halloween.
I guess. as well as the ability to magic. I mean, honestly, that seems to match what God does. Thank you there, Belgrath. Gareth. Sorry, Bel Gareth.
Mercy on those who doubt. Jesus calls us to love God with our minds. So take your questions, seek answers for them, and you'll be confident that you find them. I'm confident that you will find them. But also realize the resurrection isn't just something you think is true that you check off. It gets to the heart of who Jesus is. And at the heart of that message is that you and I have been forgiven. You know, like Kirk mentioned earlier, sometimes we have this sense of sin and this feeling of guilt. Well, maybe you feel guilt, and I feel guilty sometimes because we are guilty.
No, I think that people feel guilty for certain actions because other people have told them that they should feel guilty, or they have told them that it is wrong to do those things. But most of the things that Christians apply this to, I would say, are probably not like immoral or bad things that you should feel guilty about. Like having normal emotions towards people of the sex and gender that you're attracted to. I don't think that those emotions are anything that you need to feel bad about. I don't think that you need to feel bad about a lot of the things that Christians say that you should. And it's this idea that's pushed onto people when they're young that cause them to feel guilty about certain things. Like if you take, we just watched Jesus Camp, KC and I, and there was a girl there that loved to dance. And I'm sure that she's a great dancer now. But she's sitting there feeling guilty because, and as she put it, as a 10-year-old child, that sometimes she dances for the flesh. I think that's a really weird way to talk about dancing. But that's how a 10-year-old girl, evangelical girl as she was labeled, is dancing for the flesh. And she felt bad about it. I don't think that you have to feel bad about having fun doing something that you love for you. I don't think that's bad at all, but that is one of the central messages of this evangelical Christianity that's popped up, or, some of the more conservative Christians out there, is that if you're doing something for yourself, that's bad. You should feel guilty about it. You should do everything for God. And that is actually the horrible teaching here. And I don't know, that particular subject just really pisses me off, because it's not that people actually feel bad about doing something unless they are told that they should feel bad about it.
But Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." That is the greatest news, hence the gospel. And I'd invite you to seek it for yourself, read it, and the place to start is to just read the Gospel of John. I could send you some apologetics books, which are helpful, books on evidence. But the first place is to go to the Gospels and read John and ask yourself, who is this person, Jesus? How did he have such authority? Why has he turned the world upside down more than anybody who's ever lived? And how does that message apply to me? If you approach the Gospels with that openness, I really believe Jesus will show himself to you.
I would ask Jesus not to show himself to me. That's the kind of shit you do amongst people that want to be shown that particular glory. I do not want to see that. So please don't show yourself in that way to me. That's going to be it for our show tonight. All in all, for Kirk and Sean McDowell's video here, I didn't really hear a lot of evidence for Jesus. I didn't hear any kind of justification for considering Jesus to be a historical figure. I just heard vague calls to, early evidence for Jesus, but no specific pieces of evidence for Jesus. We got vague calls for extra biblical evidence for Jesus, but we didn't get specific examples of this extra biblical evidence, which I'm fairly certain he would include Tacitus and Josephus and Pliny the Younger and all this other stuff is who he would peg for it. But we didn't get that. We didn't get a lick of evidence. You know what we did get? Nobody questions this, so you shouldn't question it either. That last bit right there is a bit paraphrased. It's all he says is that nobody really questions this. No serious critical scholars or anything like that question the historicity of Jesus. The implication to this is neither should you. You shouldn't question it either, because these other smarter people, they don't question it. But if the evidence is really convincing, if it is early, if it is at all indicative of a historical Jesus, then it should be easy to lay it out for us. It should be easily laid out so that it convinces us. The problem is that you don't have early evidence. All you have is Paul writing in the 50s, claiming to have historical vision, or not historical, hallucinations of this risen Jesus, and he read the scriptures. He makes no call to a historical Jesus. All he makes a call to is a visionary Jesus, like a one that appears in visions to him. And that's all you got. Like literally, if you look it up and you do critical source criticism of the sources, then you'll figure out that Paul is the only independent source that we have. Mark copies from Paul. All the other gospels copy off Mark. That's not independence. That's definitely dependence. And even if the gospels are based on earlier testimony, we don't have them. We don't know what they were. We don't know what's in them. We don't know where they attributed their information from. So there's no way that we can say that those sources are independent. We can't say a thing about them. So what do we actually have? We have Paul, and that's it. And he completely separates himself from history, and he only attests to a hallucinatory Jesus. And that's it. So, I'm going to keep looking around for good evidence for a historical Jesus. If you have any evidence that you want to share with me, definitely email me, john@godlessengineering.com, and I will definitely take a look at it, or I'll tell you why I don't accept it. So please consider doing that if you're sitting there banging your head against the wall because somebody out there doesn't believe Jesus was a historical person. But if you're going to be hanging on to the rest of the stream tonight, we have the Skeptic Mafia comments come up. If you don't know, the Skeptic Mafia are the memberships here where you get a lot of perks. We're a little behind this month on the Skeptic Mafia podcast, but we're going to be getting one recorded this week. And we normally do a monthly hangout, which will be coming up at the end of this month. And I also allow the Skeptic Mafia to pick the video that we cover on Friday nights, and you get to leave a comment about the video. And that's what we're about to go into now. If you're going to be leaving the stream right now, I hope that you guys, had a good time tonight. If you will, please leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought about Sean McDowell's discussion of the historical Jesus. While you're down there, why don't you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of video. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens. But don't go, because we got the Skeptic Mafia comments to go through. Which I am going to be getting to right now. Oh, there you go. Let's see. All right. So first up tonight is Command Cyborg saying, "Hello, world." Oh no, boys and girls. Godless, what the fuck? What is this? Liar, lunatic, lord, or lied about? Lol. Corinth, like, here's my story. Here's a story I heard. Now you have heard it too. Amazing! Apparently, the more handwritten copies of a book, the truer its content. They tell us this all the time. Who grew up in the church? Don't most kids live at home? That'll be enough. Take this, Kirk. And it's the well-peen. Smash all the buttons, ring-a-ding-dong. Don't lick your phone without proper precautions. Become a mafioso. That's all, folks. Thank you. And Command Cyborg says good night. Transmission terminated. Thank you so much. Then we got Jester, Lord of Fools, saying, I love how they get entirely vague as soon as the sources aren't Christian. Almost as if those sources are entirely sus and often not claiming them to be true, but using phrasing like they say. Jesus being a legend is largely important because Roman historians never seemed interested in documenting his life when it would have clearly shaken the empire at the time. Honestly, I don't think Jesus turned the world upside down. It certainly never happened during his life, or those Roman historians would be all up in that situation. His message did, but whether or not he needed to exist for a post-mortem explosion that took 300 years for Emperor Constantine, the first, I guess, to really kick things off, and he only truly converted on his deathbed, I am not convinced. The Jedi seem to have no issue creating Padawans despite their lives being fictional. As for the answers God will provide for my difficult questions, I found none, but boy, are new ones arising. As for finding an answer for sin, try dividing the opposite side by the hypotenuse. I guarantee useful results. Turning to more important things, if you join the Skeptic Mafia, you can get news from GE and hear KC snark about it on mic. No secondhand sourcing of those hot takes, and a portion of your payment will go to charities that actually benefit real people instead of getting lost in bank accounts and overpriced jet engines. Who spends money on jet engines? I want to make that kind of YouTube money. Thank you there, Jester. Appreciate it. Next up is Peyton Dooley saying, did he say the book of Judas at 8:07? Did he mean the book of Jude, or was that a Freudian slip? I know he was saying in the book of Jude it says, but he slurred them together and it caught my ear. At the end, Jesus will show himself to you. What the? Is Jesus a pervert? Are you a pervert or something? Look, I'm here to help, okay? No, Jesus, please don't flash me. One of the proofs was, look at Christianity now. We are still talking about it 2,000 years later. I think they really underestimate the advantage Christianity had being the official religion of Rome under Constantine. They definitely do just totally miss that. Okay, hon. Next up is Metalherd, saying the biblical Jesus character never existed, period. End of story. If they want to debate a form or type of Jesus character that is not the biblical ideologicalism version, then fine. They cannot prove divinity. The biblical version of the character never existed. There is nothing to suggest a divinity anything exists. This is the claim. The claim falls dead. First, prove divinity is possible or needed or whatever. If you can't, then you don't get to move on from that to something else after. I agree, but that's why I started out the stream tonight by clarifying that, we're not talking about magical Jesus. We're talking about this, what's most likely the historical Jesus. Jonathan Nickel says Kirk admits that as a prospective believer, he already accepted the concept of sin, which means he believed there was someone to sin against. Either his story is BS or he was more than a prospective believer. At that point, he admitted that he didn't even ask for evidence of that. He quoted C.S. Lewis's famous trilemma and had to be given the legend option. Just like Lewis, he believes that Jesus said what was attributed to him and not that he was simply a character in a storybook written by anonymous authors. The reason to dismiss the legend option, a letter from Paul. Apparently, the reason why the message spread, 1, it was written and passed on by believers. 2, they liked the story. Who cares if the story sounds appealing to them? There are pretty nice fluffy fairy tales, but that doesn't make them true. You can dismiss the last half of the video as an appeal to popularity. Christians believe this fable because they are offered a reward of a life after death, but it is an empty promise. Nobody has ever shown to come back from the dead to confirm it. Even Sean's closing statement boils down to read the book. They admit the question is aimed at religious people who never question their faith and not at non-believers. I am certainly not convinced by a book and some later fan fiction. As evidence goes, they must try harder, but I doubt they ever will. Yeah, I agree that it was definitely targeted towards a very believing audience, but I feel like Sean missed out on a very good opportunity to equip maybe some people that have never heard him speak or never thought about the historical Jesus. He missed a very important opportunity to actually impart some of his information onto them. Instead of speaking in generalities, he could have given them at least specific examples that they could research further. So he doesn't do that, though. Thank you so much there, Jonathan. I appreciate you. Next up is Trickster. Trickster says, "Hi, GE and KC. Hope I have the right comment feed and I don't end up sending this to Kirk and Sean. The question is, did Jesus exist? The best answer is, we don't know. But personally, I would say that the biblical magical demigod more than likely did not exist. Kirk stands out by saying, when I was an atheist, I was worried about all the sin. Don't know about you, but being an atheist usually means that you don't believe in sin. I think that he just meant that he felt guilty for some of the shitty actions he did, and he thinks that is sin. That's not exactly how sin works. I'm just saying. Maybe Kirk wasn't as much of an atheist as he thought he was. Love the look on Sean's face as soon as he realized they no longer have the bully pulpit and that everyone has a microphone these days, as he completely sidesteps the question of mythicism. No evidence or even anything that comes close. Mainly a lot of "for the Bible tells me so." Let's see if I can play this. "For the Bible tells me so." That's not at all in the key of it, but like, subscribe, and share. Hey, got a few bucks that you don't know what to do with? Join the Skeptic Mafia, and GE will give you a bunch of neat stuff. You get to help decide what dumpster fire we watch on Friday's show, and you can drop a comment, and GE will read live, making you feel like a star. I think we have a poll to see if we can have GE mic'd for... I think we should have a poll to see if we can have KC mic'd for the shows. We all love to hear what KC has to say. I know you guys really love our interactions, and that puts such a big smile on her face. Thank you so much there, Trickster. Jason Kolasike says, "You're citing critical scholars. You reference superheroes, but your version is real? Can't prove God, can't prove Jesus. Might as well push Santa Claus. You turn to God, the largest mass murderer, to purge you of sin. That same God who is the arbiter of what is or isn't a sin. Wrong incense, mixed fabrics, shellfish, genocide thy neighbor, enslave their virgin girls." Yep, that motherfucker right there. Yep. Next up is I Heart Dogs. Thank you so much there, Jason. I Heart Dog says, "If Jesus is Yahweh in the flesh, then he's a monster." Just to get that out of the way. So great! I get to hear a sermon. Now, I dislike Sean McDowell as much as I dislike Kirk Crocoduck. I don't care if the Gospels are based on a real person or not. The Jesus of Christianity is a legend and a myth. I give this video a big fat F. Join the Skeptic Mafia, smash the subscribe, like, and the bell buttons. I'm so over all this Jesus crap. It'll be a long weekend for me. I'm still traumatized. So sorry for that there, I Heart Dogs. Next, we got Zoomy, who says, "I really don't have much to say, so I'll just say happy Tozo Tontili. Tozozo Tontili. Tozozo Tontili." Why you gotta fuck me up with this shit? Huh, Zoomy? I just don't understand. I thought we were friends. But you gotta throw Tozozo Tontili at me? Like, what the fuck? And may my Fuck. Kotiliku and Tealok look favorably upon you and your endeavors, and now on to the ASCII. I don't know how close I got to those. ASCII, Happy Easter! You see, right there? This right here is the face of a bunny that shits out eggs, feels disgusted with himself, and has to hide them before people find them. I don't know why, but that's what this motherfucker does. All right. Anyways, I just never understood the whole bunny thing. Plus, isn't Easter based on Ishtar? That's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not exactly based on Ishtar. The Easter celebrations that we celebrate now are kind of a mixture of a bunch of different, symbols from our history. I'm not exactly sure where the whole Easter bunny shitting eggs comes from, but like the Easter or bunnies in general, eggs, all that are signs of fertility, and I think it has something more to do with like regrowth, like all the wildlife coming back, or the plants regrowing and everything. Like it's more about birth or rebirth rather than anything else. So I think that I know that Digital Hammurabi, Megan and Josh, they both have thoroughly done away with the whole Easter based on Ishtar kind of idea. So I think that it's just an amalgam of different traditions from different religions in the past, not necessarily tied to any one religion. That's the best that I can say about it right now, but I'll definitely take a bit more of a look into it. Anyways, the video has nothing to do with Easter, I'm assuming, so I'll just shut up about that now. But what I won't shut up about is you licking that like button. Hell, go ahead and give your entire phone one giant sloppy, wet, moist lick. Get it on all those crevices. Make sure your phone is nice and salivated up so that you can lick all the buttons. Now, don't actually lick your phone, okay? Just lightly caress the like, subscribe, and all that. Excuse me. Oh, and go ahead and join the Skeptic Mafia, where you can get John to read your comment and say stupid shit, like insert stupid shit here. Walla walla bing bang dealing a ling bang. Star Trek is better than Star Wars? That's some stupid shit, right? Well, I'm out. Exit stage right. Badingalings. That's what I was looking for. Badingalings. Anyways, thank you so much there, Zimmy. And then finally we got Drew's book reviews, saying not much to say, so I will say happy Easter weekend to everyone. Yeah, happy Easter weekend to you too. We've got some great shit planned for this weekend, and can't wait to get to that. Let me see if I missed anything. Nope. Fan Cyborg. Any help for review? Nope. Y'all saw it. I checked it. Everybody, I've read everybody else's stuff here. Yep. All right. Well, that's going to be it. Let's get back to the home screen. So next week, we've got a lot of great stuff planned for the channel. On Monday, I do believe that we have a video about how atheists can't find God. And then on Thursday, we're going to have another Kirk and Sean video where they discuss resurrection. So you would think that would have been more apt to cover tonight, but haha, I'm actually covering that next Thursday during the week of Easter. So anyways, I'm going to go on ahead, get out of here. It was awesome hanging out with everybody tonight. I got to get Xander to bed. He's down there waiting for me. Michael, I will be checking my Facebook messages as soon as I get Xander to bed and I get me another drink, because, that's how alcoholism works. And then, this weekend, I've actually got 2 shows that I'm doing on Sunday. I'm going to be on the line, but then I'm also going to be on Tang just after the line ends. So if you're not doing anything on Sunday night, you can watch a whole bunch of GE shit if you want to. But I'll be putting those up. Next week, we've got our normal videos of the Daily Bible Podcast. We're heading back into the Bible to discuss some more Zechariah. We're going to have some magical Jesus shit to appear in there. We've got on Wednesday, we're going to have just a general clip that I'm going to be putting out from probably one of the Skeptic Mafia podcasts. And then, we'll just have another live stream next Friday. So if you heathens, aren't subscribed, you should. If you will, please go down below. Let me know what you thought about tonight's show in the comments. I do like to read them afterwards, even if I don't directly interact. I see most people's comments after, at least like a day or so afterwards. So leave a comment down there, smash that like button while you're down there, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed, so you can take part on the Friday night streams. And I guess we'll be seeing you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.